Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I rant and rave about board games, but usually more the ranty part, let's be honest. Today we're back with AEG for something which, granted, is not the first thing I'd want to gravitate towards, but I always like to try any game once. This is the Cascadia Roll and Writes, and I'm basically doing both of them at the same time because they're pretty much the same game in terms of what is included. But as people know, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of roll and writes. You know, the roll and write genre has its place, but it came on and everybody was doing roll and writes with everything just basically being rinse repeat, and it got boring and I got sick and tired of it. Now, some roll and writes do take my fancy, stuff like Long Shot the Dice Game, you know, things like that have, kind of, done pretty well. I do have Twilight Inscription on my shelf up there as probably the biggest roll and write you can get, so there are some exceptions where they do something truly kind of different and unique. This one is based off the Cascadia game, so I already mentioned when I did my Nocturne review about how that was the same grouping as Cascadia. Well, this is literally the Cascadia spin-offs, and loads of people are doing this all the time. You know, loads of publishers are taking a game that is super popular and basically going, well, how can we milk this a bit more? Let's make a roll and write out of it. And I usually kind of roll my eyes a little bit, at least before I play the game. So I'm going to take my perspective here from the Rolling Rivers set, but as I said, they are very similar. We'll get on to why later. But essentially it revolves around dice. Everybody has got 2 tiny dice for themselves, and then there's a group set of 4 big dice. You choose one of 4 different map scenarios that you're going to play, but A, B, C, and D, and they basically rank up in terms of complexity. So if we've got this set here for the A side, you can see that if I go to B's, there's a little bit more involved on there, a few more tracks, and certainly if I was to pop it into, there we go, C mode, you start getting the hexes that you're a bit more familiar with from the actual Cascadia board game, and go into D's, and it gets even more complicated besides. Not to the point of being like a heavy or medium weight game, it's still light, but you can basically tailor this to your heart's content in terms of how involved the game do I want. Certainly if you're teaching the game for the first time, you might just stick with the A side, although I think most people could probably handle B just fine. C and D, you might maybe want to play it with people who are a bit more familiar with this type of genre. But the way it works is basically you and all the other players, will roll their 2 personal dice. Somebody rolls the big dice, and they've got the various symbols for the different animals, just like Cascadia, but one of them is a special die that might have some cool little power that you can trigger. And the idea is that on your sheet, which is probably the longest roll and write sheet I've ever seen, it's basically a continuous tally chart of all the animal symbols that you have. So you basically, every time you change up what animals you have, you just cross out the previous number and write in the new total. So you've always got kind of like a running tally, as I say, of all the animals you have, as well as those little pine cones. But what you do is that you look at the dice here, you can spend the pine cones to do things like change up a symbol, change down, or take multiple dice, but you will basically take all the animals from one type. So this was a pretty bad roll here, so I'm going to re-roll that again. Alright, this is a little bit better. I've got 3 hawks, a salmon, and a fox. So I could do some shenanigans to maybe turn the salmon into a hawk, but assuming that I didn't, I could just say, right, I'm going to take 3 hawks. I note them down on my pad, I've now got 3 hawks. What you're trying to do throughout the game is basically fulfill these habitat cards. These habitat cards all have a requirement for, like, I need a bear, a fox, and a salmon for this one, okay? And then we go a little bit further. I suddenly need 2 foxes, a hawk, and 4 salmon for this one. And they all vary in terms of complexity. But they also have a number value, as well as some rewards, and a type of habitat. Because as you complete these cards, you get to mark down on the map that you're doing based on the terrain and numbers that you've done, and these will score you points in kind of whatever way you think of from roll and writes. You know, complete rows and columns, you get bonuses, which could be more symbols, more actions and such. But as you go through the different maps, you can do a little bit more, like create little clusters for points and, you know, get bonuses and achieve objectives and things like that. So it's a little bit more complexity as you go through. But essentially, you roll the dice, you get as many animals as you can, try to complete as many of these as possible, and, you know, score points via your map. As well as this, you've also got these completion cards that go above or below the different habitat cards, depending on whether they are a bonus you get for completing them, or if they're blue, possibly even a discount or some other benefit, like something to make it easier to complete that specific card. But the cards that you've got are essentially like laid out in a row of 4. These completion cards will be below or above it, depending on what they are, and as you complete them, they'll basically sort of go through conveyor belt style, but these completion cards will stay the same. So one habitat that was here is not necessarily going to be discounted anymore. It might be a new one that comes out in a little show. And you basically play the game for 20 rounds, constantly re-rolling the dice, trying to do your best with the symbols, marking stuff on your sheet, and of course, once the 20 rounds are done, see how many points you've got. So production quality-wise, you've got decent, basic quality dice, but they're still chunky and they're not going to scratch anytime soon. You've got the habitat cards with Beth Sobel's gorgeous artwork on there, just showcasing all this lovely scenery, which is like one of the best things in Cascadia. And you've got a decent amount of these pads before you're going to have to think, oh, maybe I might need to laminate a few of them just to be on the safe side. And all in all, it's a pretty decent package. But you are paying for that package. This game, like just one of these sets, averages out somewhere between the regions of about £18 to £21 when you buy it online at the moment. Some of them say Kickstarter edition. I don't think there's very much in that Kickstarter edition that's important, but even like, I think that's the one you mainly buy online, but you are talking around the 18 to 20 quid mark for, one set of this, which is not cheap for a roll and write. Roll and writes can typically be less than that, closer towards the £10 mark, maybe like 12 to 15 tops. 20 is on the upper end of that. But you are getting a decent amount of quality and components for that money. And bearing in mind, if you spend the money on both of these sets, you're paying about £40 for effectively a roll and write game. Is there any difference between them? Honestly, very minor. I mean, you get yellow dice instead of blue dice. Great. The special die has 2 different symbols compared to the other one, or maybe like a couple of different spots. And it's like, okay, it's marginally different to the special die in here. Whoopee-doo. You then have 4 more environment pads, so you've essentially got, more different maps or like variants of the scenarios you can do, except the A one is exactly the same as the one in the Rolling Rivers. The one in the B section is essentially exactly the same as the B in here. So the only ones that are actually different, and even then not that drastically different, is C and D in here. So you can argue that you've probably got 6 different, maps that you can try if you have both sets, as opposed to 8. And that's the thing with this. If you're buying both of these sets, you are not getting twice the content. You are essentially getting probably about 25% more content, if we're being totally honest here. And I don't know if that's kind of worth it for £40. So really, you might as well just pick your poison in terms of the artwork. And for me, that's Rolling Rivers, because I just have a thing when it comes to water-based scenery and artwork. All my favorite relaxation music involves water sounds. Some of my most nostalgic memories of childhood involve scenic streams in the woods with water and streams and stuff, and pictures like this, with the bear and the water behind, I would have on my wall, whereas just a random yellow grass playing with some foxes, I wouldn't really see the need to put that on my wall. I mean, come on, there's no contest here between which picture is nicer. But that's literally the only reason I pick Rolling Rivers rather than that. It's literally an artwork difference. The differences in the C and D maps are not that substantial to warrant you spending £40 on a roll and write. But I digress. Is the game still fun to play? Yes, it is. It's definitely better on the later maps though. The A map is really just a beginner's map. I mean, I played it like the other day and, had some fun with it. It was nice and light. It got me to learn the rules. That's pretty much the only reason you play the A map. Do it as a tutorial if players are likely to be new to the system. If they've played Cascadia or have any idea how roll and writes typically work, you could just jump straight to the B map, which is still fairly straightforward. It's just not as straightforward as A. But to get the most out of the system, you're going to play on a C or D map, and that's probably the one you're going to do more often, which kind of means that maybe you're only getting 2 decent maps out of 4 in one set, and if you combine them now, you're getting 4 out of 8. Not to say the A and Bs are bad, it's just I reckon that most people when they play them are going to think, well, that's fine, but I'd kind of rather just play a C and D. You might play A and B if you're strapped for time, say, like you're taking this around like as a portable game to take while you're traveling. But the game itself is still pretty good fun. The whole rolling of the dice and choosing which symbols you want is a painful decision to take when you're trying to decide, oh, come on, I need elk, but then that's going to slide down, this is going to slide down, that's going to fall off. Well, what do I need right now? Well, I need some foxes, because those coming up are foxes. And I also need a mountain, because if I get that mountain, I get more bonuses. For completing a column. So it's like, well, I need to aim for this. Well, how the hell do I turn these into foxes then? Well, there's 2. Well, that can be a 3rd fox. We can maybe change that down to a fox. That'd be great. Right, cool. 4 foxes. And I like this little system here where you just cross out the previous number and write in a new one. You're going to be doing that a lot, so you better like it, but it's a nice way to keep tabs on what you have. You don't have to track it with tokens or anything unnecessarily, like a track system with a token on it. It's just nice and simple to write it on your little pad there. It works for, works in several respects. And probably the highlight of the game is more these little cards, these completion cards, because you can deal out the 4 basic ones when you're learning the game, but then after that you basically just mix the whole lot together, draw 4 that are in use for the whole game, and the rest just go away. So you might have a game like this one where I've got 3 bonuses for completion and 1 discount card, but I might draw 3 of the blue ones and only 1 of these, and they can be very different effects, and you can combo these in different ways. And because these are fixed, so you know, this sort of scenario I would basically have it like so, the fact that these slide over, like, you know, that one's now gone, these now slide and get these bonuses, and a new one comes out for the discount one. This kind of allows you to maybe like forward plan a little bit. Like, I know I can't complete a card easily this round. Let's get what I can. That card's going to shift to there, and when it shifts to that spot, I'm going to complete it later. So why don't we just focus on animals now, complete that later. And you get to make this decision quite a lot with these cards, and it is cool in that respect. The difference between these cards and the yellow and the blue set really is no different. I mean, yes, you do get a new set of these, but it's just a picture with some requirements and, you know, a terrain symbol and a pinecone reward. I mean, is it really that much of a different game when you pick one set over the other? You know, give me a break. So, you know, the game itself is fine, and much in the same sort of like thing of flat out games as when it comes to their solo rules. Well, one thing I do love, the fact that the quick reference on the back of the book is actually really good for remembering how to play this game. This is a very nice little reference saying on top of the round summaries that you have. You can even play it in family mode if you really want to keep this simple, and I mean super simple. Tells you in here how to mix the versions, but as I said, there's not really a huge amount to mix. I mean, it says here, you can use all the personal dice to play a game with more players, up to 8. If you are the sort of person that is playing roll and writes with 8 people, what the hell is wrong with you? Seriously. Roll and writes, I mean, this roll and write is a solo game. You know, there is no reason to play this with more players. You can do, but you don't interact with anybody, so it's just a case of whatever, you know, it doesn't make a difference. But I do like the fact that in the solo rules, you have the little scenario and achievement sheet, and I normally don't like this sort of thing, but in flat out games seem to do it well, because they give you all these different setups, like set up these particular completion cards, set up this particular map with you know, what is it? Yeah, you get the different sheets, choose the completion cards, and then it gives you a goal, a victory point to aim for, and then you can basically, you know, go through these to your heart's content. So it makes this game a decent solo affair as opposed to a group affair. Not much else to say, it's kind of what you expect. It's a spin-off of one of the best gateway games of all time. It's not really bringing anything new to the table. We've seen this dice mechanic before. The main thing that is kind of unique with this is these little completion cards, which do make it fun. You know, this is a fun game. I just don't think that it's worth buying both sets. Just pick one and be happy. If you really adore this game, then fine, you can buy both, but again, £20 a set, £40 for 2 of them, and you're basically just getting maybe 25% extra content, and it's not even that different from what you've already played. I don't see why it's necessary, but you know what, you do you. That's just me. So overall, I give this one a 7 out of 10. It's a good game. It's solid. I can recommend it. You know, out of all the roll and writes I've played, and much, you know, certainly I don't own many roll and writes, this is still one of the better ones I've played. You know, something like Twilight Inscription and Long Shot the Dice Game and that have got more sort of cool quirks to them that make me prefer them overall. But, you know, if I'm going to pick one of those spin-off roll and writes to play, like the ones that are basically cool game, the roll and write, most of which I find to be very meh, not particularly great, you know, or not that interesting. This is definitely, I think, one of the better ones out there. You know, this one's kind of like up there with something like the Isle of Cats roll and write, and possibly to an extent the Dinosaur Island roll and write, although that one was a bit clunky and pretty sort of over fiddly for what it was. But yeah, something like the Isle of Cats roll and write. If you enjoyed how that made the game, then I reckon you'll get a pretty good kick out of this. But yeah, it's a solid one. It's a solid one overall. It's not blowing anyone's mind. It's just another roll and write. Just possibly don't worry about getting both sets. Pick your poison, pick your favourite terrain, pick whether you like blue or yellow as a colour die, and just stick with that. So that's it from me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube, thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Let me know your thoughts on the video, let me know your thoughts on the roll and writes. Do you like these roll and writes when these games come out with the spin outs, or are you kind of tired of this genre? Until next time, remember, regardless of whether your preference is water or hills, it's still only a game, so just pick one and have fun. Bye for now.